Welcome back to the War Room, Svihlik and Shooter. As you can see, I am posted up down at Lake Point in Georgia. We got the big NPI kicking off the summer to move on to the next classes of future prospects, DJ. But we can't go there yet because the draft is in middle of July and it's an absolute disaster probably for most scouting departments.
Yeah, it's an exciting time of year, but it's also a very difficult time of year. It's funny. We talk about this narrative of like scouting to the end, but what it does is it ends up creating a lot of questions that teams have to answer. And we're still at a point in time, whether it's the draft league or it's the MLB combine or what we recently finished up with, where the conference tournaments and the regional, all of those provide great opportunities to get final looks at players with the draft still a month or so away and to change your mind. You could change your mind at this point. Players are always evolving and they're always teaching you new things. And you use these opportunities to get a different perspective with fresh eyes. So it is a very difficult time of year, but it's also a time of year where you can really gain confidence in your picks and comfort in your picks.
Now, you talked about those postseason tournaments and regionals, conference tournaments, and especially helium guys. What are guys doing late in the year? And we have to have Dr. Seifert on, David Seifert over from D1 Baseball, Prep Baseball, our college expert, draft expert in the whole thing. I want to tell one story right here, Seif, as we welcome you on with DJ. How important is late season success? And I always think back to, and this will strike a chord with you, DJ, 2019, I'm watching the SEC tournament, Vanderbilt's going off, JJ Bleday is an absolute mega dude. And where's the camera going the entire weekend? Up to the booth, Derek Jeter, who's with the Marlins at that point, locked in. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, there's no way the Marlins are not taking JJ Bleday. Like, it's a must. This guy's an absolute dude. DJ, what was that like? Because DJ to DJ, Jeter's in the house. This guy's unreal. I mean, it's a slam dunk. Was it just a no-brainer at that point?
Well, it just confirms when you're looking at players like that, whether it's in that situation or it's sometimes at a pre-draft workout, when you're trying to answer certain questions about players, because you're always trying to answer questions. They always come up. And the player readily provides the answers you need. It just makes your decisions that much more comfortable. Never easy. I would never say that. They're never easy, but they make your decisions that much more comfortable when a player does something like that.
Exactly. And Seif, I want to ask you this because it's almost like late in the year, right? All the pressure's on these college guys. The lights are there. You got a full week. The buzz is there in Hoover or in Arizona where you've been for the Pac-12 tournament before, or down in Dallas or I guess where's the ACC now? In Raleigh. Do you forget what happened the rest of the year? How hard is it to not remember the fact that we just went through 15 weeks? Hagen Smith just dominated for the last 4 months. How hard is it for you to remember that?
Well, I saw some of Hagen Smith the other day. Now you mentioned him. He gave up 10 runs combined in his first inning of the year, which was a rough one at home. And he gave up that inning plus the last inning of the year in the regionals. He gave up 10 runs in those 2 innings. The other 80 innings, he gave up like 7 combined. So that's crazy. That just blows my mind. But to get back to your question, I mean, it's important to close on a good note. You know, whether you're closing in your conference tournament, you don't advance the regional or just in the regional. Obviously, you want to leave a good impression. But I think there are different categories for guys. A guy like, for example, Braden Montgomery, right? Started out awesome. Kind of hit a second half lull. Now, if he can pick it back up here in the Super Regional, hopefully College World Series, that's the complete picture. There's a guy like Jonathan Santucci from Duke, right? He's missed time. He missed a month, I think, with a rib injury. He pitched 2 innings at the ACC tournament or in the regional, and he looked like he was back. So now he's got his, so now he's established, I'm back and healthy. Or Trey Yesavage from East Carolina, who missed the conference tournament with a collapsed lung. He shoved the regional, So I just think there's different categories for different guys, but every guy, it's obviously important, whether you've had a great season to finish great or you're coming back off an injury to show great. But yeah, I think it's highly important to finish on a high note.
I want to go a little more historically here. And DJ, you'd written down here like a guy like Will Bednar, who huge postseason for Mississippi State back in 21 en route to the national championship, was explosive late, dominated Texas. I think he struck out like 15 or 16 there. Comes back and beats Vanderbilt in the championship game. I think he was the most valuable player out there. I always think about pitchers, especially college pitchers, haven't done it myself, like Hagen Smith, 100 innings. Like, you're at the end where all these lights are on you, the TV, you have to perform. But hey, that's a lot of innings that you've thrown there. But a guy like Bednar, who got even better late in the year, DJ, what was that like for the guys like that? Even in here, Ty Floyd, who probably made himself a lot of money in LSU's run last year. What were those guys like when you were scouting them?
Yeah, it's exciting. Seif just talked about this. It's really exciting at the end of the year when players are doing that, because make no mistake, these are players that have earned your like. You generally like these players, and you're looking for ways to separate them. And when they provide you the confidence and the comfort by doing those kind of things, it's really, it makes your job a very, very difficult job. It just makes it a little bit easier. So that's what I look back even years ago. Lance Lynn had a really tough time overcoming his sports hernia, and he was an absolute warrior. He struggled. He has ups and downs all year long. He has a rough outing against Georgia the last week of the year. He goes to the SEC tournament, and here we are 30-plus war later. He steps up, and he's the guy. So they give you the players give you these signals. Cade Horton, just a couple years ago, I had the same scout that called me about Andrew Pinckney being the best player, not named Dylan Cruz or Wyatt Langford, said Pinckney's the best player at the SEC tournament. The Nationals take him in the 4th round. He does good. He really does. He's out doing really, really well already in AA, certainly outperforming some of his draft expectation. And then I think it was the same year was Cade Horton, where he was injured, takes it all the way to Omaha. And I have the same exact area scout tell me, hey, he's punching you right in the face. This is clearly a high 1st round pick. So these players constantly give you this comfort as they answer questions. And I think what Seif was talking about there, I can certainly empathize with. The players they have different categories. And I guess I would rephrase it like questions that you learn all year. And when they provide answers to the questions, it just makes you more comfortable.
Well, DJ, let me ask you, because from the scouting director side of things, are you glued into every conference tournament? So like me, I'm the area guy. Oh, I want do well this week because I know that our brass is going to be watching this, right? The SEC, everybody's watching the SEC tournament, the Big 12, Pac. Please do well because there's a chance you can get my guy. Is that true where, hey, the fact that this hit at the right place at the right time really helped me get this guy drafted?
I'm very aware of this whole recency bias thing. So not necessarily, to answer your question, not necessarily. I spent a lot of time, and I think directors should spend a lot of time getting fresh looks on players. So you and I have talked a lot about this NPI and some of the players that you know from 2025 and some of the role that I'm going to fill when I come down there. Or maybe it's taken someone like Seif here who hasn't seen this group of players and send him over and just get a fresh look of eyes. That's that volume and diversity of looks becomes very, very important that I've talked about in the past. And I'm a huge believer in that. So just to take different, and you break down the roles, whether you're a cross checker or an area scout, it didn't matter. I just took our very best scouts and put them in places where they can make an impression. And then you just try to listen. The further up the food chain you move in scouting, you just have to be a better listener because your eyes can't be everywhere all the time.
Are most teams, because I've seen a lot of guys, what regional you're going to, what conference tournament, they'll send guys out of area. We're sending this guy to Hoover. Oh, I got the ACC. I got the Big East, wherever they may be. Is that something that you guys did? Is that something that most teams do?
Yeah, I think a lot of teams do that. When it comes to the regional, some teams just scout them on video because at that point you've seen a lot, unless you need a specialized look. But the conference tournaments, you do spend a lot of time going out and seeing the players for the last time. And I like to I'd like to get players out there, or excuse me, not players, scouts. I like to get scouts out there that hadn't seen the players, that don't have a history with the player, and spread them around a little bit just to get a fresh look. And a lot of times it matters. Now it's up to me. Seif was a cross checker. That's the key. You've got to get the cross checker to listen. The scouting director has to listen. When my scout calls me last year and says that Andrew Pinckney is the best player at the SEC tournament, does it mean he's a first rounder? No. but I got to pay attention that player was on the field, not just with his draft class, but he was on the field with underclassmen that were also first rounders. And that scout is making a very, very strong statement when he says that. And clearly the Nationals paid attention to it. And he went out. It seems like he's rewarding them. He's playing extremely well in AA right now. So the scout has to recognize it. And then the cross-checkers and the director have to have the confidence to listen.
Awesome. Well, let's shift over to some college guys, more specific names. Dr. Seifert. And one on the top of my head is a kid named Jay Wolfel, right-hander at Virginia, kind of an up and down year. Weren't sure where we would get. This kid throws the game of his life against Mississippi State, just collecting whiffs in the zone. And now he's going to have a chance in the Super Regional. We'll see what happens from there. What did you see out of him, and where are you thinking about him now because of that start?
As you mentioned, he had an up and down year. And when I saw Virginia at Louisville in the middle of the season, he was on the downside of his year, so he didn't even pitch in the 3-game series. But I saw him last summer at the USA Collegiate National Team Trials. At that time, the low 90s fastball, a really good changeup. The breaking ball was kind of a mix, like it was a blender. I mean, you didn't know what you're going to get. And I saw, a guy could be a 3rd-round guy. And also at the time, the rumor was that he was going to quit football and just go full-time to baseball. And shortly thereafter, that is what he announced. So then it's kind of like, oh, man, this guy, this athlete looking like that, just concentrating on baseball, kind of like Brody Brecht did, and kind of like I think it's about the same time as the Clemson outfielder. Now it's Will, help me out here. Anyway, the Clemson outfielder. But they all kind of announced around the same time last summer. So you kind of dream on Wolford, man. If he can start, he's this athletic. He's got 3 pitches. He throws strikes. It just didn't work out for him. I know he went back and forth between 2-seam, 4-seam, this breaking ball, cutter. Just was kind of just trying everything this spring, and he finally obviously put it together in his last outing. So, as far as that game in particular, I didn't watch a ton of it. I'm sure you were locked in it, being Mississippi State and Virginia, though. But, super talented guy. And if he would have pitched like that all year, yeah, he would have been a top 2-rounder, but he didn't. But it was important for him to finish strong, show what he had, kind of like Griff McGarry 3-4 years ago. I mean, that guy finished really strong too. So, another Cavalier. But, it was awesome to see him do it. Hopefully he can continue to do it, because if he does, he goes into a different category than he was sitting in all year.
Now, let me, DJ, maybe you can mention on these 2 guys, because I'll shift over to getting back to Trey Yesevich and Jonathan Santucci. 2 presumptive first-rounders. They have some injuries. I mean, Yesevich was a bit different, but how do you consider that as a scouting director? Like, hey, this guy came back, we like it, now he's back high? Or do they kind of sift down to like, yeah, we probably evaluated as a top 10 pick, but those injuries are now he's shifting into that 14 to 20. Is that something that you lose sight of?
Well, I talked about that in one of our previous discussions about the medical side. At this point, you don't have the medical. You're still waiting for that stuff to come on. And MLB has done a pretty good job of cleaning that up, certainly since when Seif started scouting and I started scouting, where there was a ton of guesswork. Now you do end up getting access to some good information on these players. So if you have questions, that's ultimately, but in real time, when you're watching them at a conference tournament or you're watching them at a regional or a super regional, all you can do as a scout is pay attention to the signals. And for, you're sitting in the ballpark, and what pitch, is there any difference in his pitch package? Is his command going south? There's all those different types of signals you can pay attention to, but that's all you can do. As far as moving him up and down the board, if it really is a medical consideration, it's going to have to happen later on after the conference tournament, unless he's showing you something that's obvious. He walks off the mound holding his arm or a leg or whatever it might be. So not too much.
Safe, where do you have those guys? Where are they going? Today, Yesevich, Santucci, where are these guys going?
Yesevich goes in the top half of the first round. I think Santucci is probably, he only threw 2 innings, and it was a good 2 innings. He still walked 2 guys in 2 innings, and his thing is health and command, right? Those are his 2 weaknesses. Everything else, athlete, fastball, breaking ball. He answers all the other bells. It's just command and health. So if he can pitch again in the Super Regional and the Who's make it to the World Series, even better for him. But man, or not the Who's. I'm sorry, the Blue Devils.
He's with
ACC schools mixed up. We're talking here.
DJ, but let me ask you that. Is that a kid you'd want to see? Like, is that a kid who's going to go off and play this summer? Does he need to go pitch more?
Say that again. I missed the name. He cut out on me.
Santucci. Does he need to go pitch more?
Well, yeah. I mean, if he's been shut down, you certainly would like to. It's no different than the Carson Wisenhunt situation. Okay. I know Carson wasn't hurt. Who's the guy, Seif? You know it maybe off the top of your head. I don't. The guy from San Diego, UC San Diego.
Josh Randall?
Yeah. No, is that his name? Michael.
He's at USD.
I'm thinking of UC San Diego. I thought there was a guy. But either way, if they haven't pitched, if they're all beat up down the stretch, you certainly would like to see them pitch a little bit more before you go plowing into it. Certainly with your first pick. Maybe you'd have a little bit more stomach for it in the comp or the second round. But your first pick, that's pretty tough to do, to hang your hat on.
You're speaking of Brian Forcucci, right?
Yes, that's who I was speaking of. Good one.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't think of it.
I was really impressed with you, Savage. It was the first time I had really glued in on him. I know, DJ, you got to see him at Memphis, but it's kind of funky, and his ability to repeat and find the strike zone with that was it was really impressive to me, especially what he was coming off of. Tough Pittsburgh kid. So saying a lot. Actually, both of them are Northeast kids because Santucci's a Massachusetts guy. That's interesting. Top the first round. Like, what were you gonna say?
I was just saying, and it gets a little tricky too. I mean, like the Wisenhunt, really, he missed the entire season, so he pitched in the Cape. That was all range. But like, for example, should Santucci go pitch more because he missed some innings? He should, but if his last outing of the year, wherever Duke ends their season, is a good one, his agent's not going to let him go pitch because he wants that last outing to be the best memory, and hey, he's good to go. So it's not just so cut and dry. There's third, fourth parties involved.
Well, it is interesting. So like, it's not cut and dry, but there's a certain point where they just won't take him. Right? There's no comfortability in this. We think he may have some issues here. So does he want to try to push and be a top 20 pick versus, hey, your floor is probably here at let's say 40. So like, are you comfortable with that versus, hey, I really want to get into the 20 to 25 range? But moving on to some more arms that you have on here, kind of some smooth risers who had good years, but a guy like Luke Holman at LSU who was, just kind of steady throughout. Did a great job. I mean, his transfer from Alabama was lights out for LSU. What do you have on him, side?
Yeah, I mean, he's been exactly that. He's a smooth riser. He's stayed healthy, and he's performed all year long. He's posted, 16 times now? No injuries, never missed anything. I mean, those are the guys that also rise because he did what he did. I mean, he had a great year, and he stayed healthy. And those guys going into the year, I think the industry's like, oh, he's kind of a soft toss command guy, 2 pitches. And that's kind of what he is. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of guys like him performing in the SEC, stayed healthy. And I think a lot of people forget with Luke Holman too, is he was up to 98 last summer at the CNT trials. He wasn't very good during the trials, but he was lights out when they played the regular season games. He made the club, made the final 24-man roster, and he was lights out, and he was up to 98. So just because he's only been up to 94, 95 as a starter, mostly 90, 92, doesn't mean he doesn't have it in him. He's just throwing more strikes, and if they put him in a bullpen, all of a sudden he probably is going to be back up to 98, 99. But he is a starter. I mean, it's a starter delivery. It's a starter arsenal. He can give you long innings. So I put him as a season-long riser because, again, there's different types of risers, and he's just had success all year, and he'll see it on draft day.
There's some clubs that are probably really upset that you're reminding all the others about the 98, 99 last summer in Cary. Another guy you have on here who I love this year, we really liked him in high school, but Ryan Prager at Texas A&M, who kind of fits both bills, whereas it was a steady rise, but then he goes out in the regional, has an immaculate inning. So now that's going to be the tagline for a while. What do we got in Ryan Prager?
Well, he probably fits like 3 different taglines. He's coming back off of injury, right? So he's proved he's healthy. He's posted every week. He's performed all year long. And yeah, the immaculate inning. I mean, if that doesn't sell you over, and I know it's just not based on 1 inning, right? It's sample size. But like an immaculate inning in a regional game, that's pretty impressive. And actually, the funny thing is there were 2 on that same day. 2 on the same day. I think Jamie Arnold had one for Florida State too, both lefties. So that's just side note here. Jamie Arnold is going to be a top 20, 25 in college baseball. next year, another lefty. But yeah, I mean, so what hasn't Prager done? I mean, again, you go back to the industry. Oh, he's just a lefty that throws 90 and, there's no power there and he profiles to the back of the rotation. Yeah, but there's not a lot of guys like him in the draft. So all of a sudden he's got the helium going up because he's healthy, because he's posted. Same reasons as Luke Holman.
And how high do you think he can go, Prager?
Man, I think he's pushed himself into the end of day one. So
oh wow,
mid to back half of the second round. Again, like maybe not on your paper right here that we're looking at, like not that we're looking at, but like if you have your list, he's not probably sitting there right now with bells and whistles on him. But when you get in that draft room, and DJ's led draft rooms, I've listened in draft rooms and given my opinion in draft rooms. But that big list of 100 guys dwindles pretty quick when your doctors say no on these 10. Your scouts say, man, I don't really care for the makeup on these 5. And the signability on these 5 is very good. So now your 100 is down to 80. And maybe this guy's too risky for that spot based on what you just picked ahead of him. So now your list is even shorter, and Ryan Prager and Luke Holman fit what you're looking for.
Outstanding. DJ, I want to ask. Oh, go ahead.
How does this guy, I haven't seen Prager. I watched him on TV a little bit recently. How does he compare to a guy that we really liked? And I'm thinking about this because you said somewhere in the back half of day one, maybe in the back of the second round or something. We loved, he's hurt right now, but he came out and was really good for the Nationals. Jake Bennett. How's Prager compared to Bennett?
Little different. Bennett was, a power guy with a big breaking ball. Tell me, I mean, if that's your memory of him, but
yeah, a lot of 93s from Bennett, a lot of 2s and 3s.
Yeah, he was a bigger, stronger guy. I thought he was more of like a power lefty. Prager, 90-91, he's a really high pitchability lefty. I mean, and he's got a swing and miss breaking ball. I mean, and he's also got a good changeup. So he spots his fastball. He's competitive. He's got deception to him. So a little different for me, but if they're similar for you, then that's scouting, right?
It sounds like a guy that goes in the same spot as a Bennett. It's just they can be different pitchers. They can come in different shapes and stuff, but like good power conference, left-handed pitchers, that's where they go. You made some good points about guys are going to fall off the board for different reasons, whether it's signability or injury or whatever it might be. And if a guy's healthy and he's been good, there's just not that many lefties in the country. So they just go up in that area. So,
hey, DJ, let me ask you about a pitcher, same team, Prager, kid named Chris Cortez. Huge fan of his. I'm watching him comes in against Mississippi State late in the game. I think he was up to 100. It looked like about 40 inches of horizontal movement on whatever he was throwing up there. But filthy stuff. What I want to ask you more about, like the player development side, analytics, talking over, hey, this kid's got some freaky stuff. He's not super big, right-hander out of Nevada, but it's explosive stuff. The way he's been used at A&M is there's a lot of necessity. We can bring him into any situation, right? This guy, we're going to get some swings and misses. He's going to clean up some garbage. But does a guy like that on your board, hey, we think this guy's a chance to start. Hey, he's got a slider. You can sink it. We're going to take this. We think our analytically, we can do something with that and make him a starter. That's something that's being discussed in a war room, on the scouting side, where, hey, there's some hidden value to this guy who already has big value.
Yes, this happens all the time. I don't know Cortez as well. Has he ever started?
He has not. High school, but he has not at A&M.
Yeah. So he's been a college guy that hasn't started. So if the conversation is not moving towards starter, the player from Wake Forest last year that was the reliever that is now out starting, they had 2 relievers. They had Minacci, and at Wake Forest, it was Minacci and somebody else.
Massey was the other one from this year. They shifted.
Yeah. They took one of the relievers last year and they sent him out as a starter. So he was obviously being discussed as a starter. That's a really critical part here. Probably a conversation for a whole pitching discussion. If he's not being discussed as a starter, it's really hard to get excited about him really high up on the board. And when I say high, in the top 3 rounds, history just doesn't support these types of players up in that area, even if they have great stuff. And the reason for that is they're talked about up there because their stuff is always going to be better than the starter when they're this high on the board. And then the starters inevitably go out into pro ball and pass them. So this guy does sound pretty exciting. I'd like to know if they're talking about him. They probably should be if they want to talk about him.
What do you think, Si?
I think a team's going to answer that question for you. If they take him in the second round, they think he can start, right? If he falls to the fourth, which he won't be in the fourth round. They think he's a reliever, third either way. But I think knowing the delivery, the athlete, he has 2 dominant pitches, but he can throw for strikes. I think you draft him, you send him as a starter. I mean, it's just absolutely, it's 99 to 100 with an invisible slider. I mean, you could give it an 80 grade, 70 if you want to be light. I mean, it's that good of stuff. His whole thing is just consistency with his command, and he's improved his walk rate immensely this year. So if I'm picking, I'm considering Chris Cortez in the second round, just stuff-wise, set him out as a starter and see what you got, because you always can put him back in the bullpen and let him blow. And at the end of the day, if you get a back-end guy in the second round of the draft, that's not what you want going in the second round, but if that's what you end up getting, that has a lot of value, whether it's he's in your major league bullpen or you just flipped him for a position player on July 31st. So and then the weight guy was Seth Keener.
Good call. Keener
Minacci. Yeah.
Say, what about these 2 guys? Speaking of starters, so a kid, Cal Steven, was a Purdue transfer over to Mississippi State, and Jacob Kometz, who's at Oregon State. Both starters with log innings, had good years. I guess I would say Kometz kind of has jumped up late here. Talk about those 2.
I hate to admit, but I saw Kometz opening week it was week 2 at Globe Life, Oregon State, against Arkansas, the big Hagen Smith versus Aiden May game. But Kometz pitched the next day, and I walked away from there like, man, all right, hadn't seen this guy before. He was low 90s, good breaking ball, threw strikes. I'm like, all right, 4th, 5th round, somewhere in there. But he's posted every week. He's now up to 95, 96. And again, just like it's a different category, like Luke Holman, like we just talked about. But Kometz, I mean, for me, I'd start considering him now in the third round.
He's posted for 3 years.
I mean, that's where he's risen to. So, like, tip of the cap to that guy. He's always been good, but he's just got he's performed. He's stayed healthy. He's pitching his club into a super regional. And then you can probably speak more on Cal Steven. I've never seen him live, but he's another guy. Again, he's done it, right? He's pitched in the A spot in front of Gerangelo, and he's performed. So again, I know it's a little different how he does it. Is a little different, but he's pitching the best conference in the country. ACC fans may have a small argument right now after regionals, but you get the point.
I find Kometz really interesting hearing you guys talk about him. I'm thinking a lot about development curves here and how everything has gotten switched. When we were younger, players learned how to pitch, then the stuff came later. And we've gotten so far away from that. And now it's just throw it as hard as you possibly can, and we'll see if we can get you in the zone and cut down your walk rates, and we're going to pay you, and you're going to get your scholarship. This is an interesting case. I saw this guy when he was in high school. He can flat out pitch. So he has a much more traditional, historic path as I listen to you guys talk, which I find very interesting. I'm looking at his information here. When you say he's posted since day one, how many freshmen in Division I baseball came in as freshmen and started 15 games and then started 14 games and then started 15? There's something probably right. His temperament's probably right. He knows how to pitch. I find this guy really interesting, having not seen him since high school. But I just really like that he's followed a more historic or traditional development curve. And to hear you guys, I did watch him on TV the other night, actually, and I did see some of those 4s and 5s. So pretty interesting cat.
Let me ask both of you guys, because it's something that I've thought about. Is that something that's greater attribution of a West Coast kid? So I'm thinking, think of all the Santa Barbara first round picks and all the Big West guys, the Pac-12, those kids who go off, and just because they kind of know how to pitch to contact versus, hey, we got to go in the SEC, we got to miss bats tonight because we got a small park, it's flying out. We're not turning a lineup 2 and 3 times. Is that something you see more? Hey, we think this mid-major West Coast kid might have a chance to start. And I don't want to call Oregon State a mid-major, but hey, this kid from New Mexico who went to Oregon State just kind of knows how to pitch now.
I could think of a lot of examples. I mean, we've got a left-hander here, but Matt Boyd certainly outperformed his draft expectation. We know the story with Shane Bieber. The Cardinals took the guy from Santa Barbara a couple years ago. Name is slipping my mind. The guy the Yankees took just a couple years ago out of Cal Poly. He wasn't a hard thrower. He was a changeup guy. His prospect stat before they traded him blew through the roof.
Should he trade twice now?
You could be on something there without the West Coast guy.
That velocity I was thinking of. Let me do one more picture with you, Seif, just because this guy's more of an intriguing factor for my LeBaron Johnson at Texas. Talk me through, because he was draft eligible last year, right? Am I mistaken there, Seif?
No, you're correct.
It's really difficult to come back after knowing that you could have gone. Right now, every time you have a bad start, hey, he should have signed. He should have done this. It goes rocky. What are we looking at with him? Because the stuff was obviously there last year. He was electric.
Right. I think the thorn in his side has always been all the scouts see him as a reliever, right? It's just super good stuff. I think he saw himself as a starter and wanted, starter money. So I wasn't part of any discussion, but I'm thinking he wanted second round money, and they're often fourth round money, right? That's reliever starter. Again, total speculation, but yeah, he's a fourth year player, one of the best fourth year players back this year. But I mean, how can you not notice what he did versus Texas A&M? I mean, it was up to 97 plus splitter and a plus slider. I mean, the splitter might've been a 70, struck out 8 and 5 innings, only allowed 2 hits and 1 run. He only walked 3. I hate to just sit here and cite his performance stats, but I mean, that was obviously very noticeable in a really, pressure-packed situation, against basically the enemy. So as far as finishing well late, LBJ certainly fits that category.
And DJ, that specifically is tying into what we're talking about here today, that postseason buzz. Hey, he's back. His last outing, he's back, he's good. If he does that in the middle of April and then goes into back into a roller coaster, you kind of forget about it. But hey, he just did that at College Station in front of 8,000 bubble blowing fans, and he's back. You leave it in a good point. But let's shift over to some hitters here, and we're going to eventually get towards what I think the culminating thought from DJ is going to be here late in some of these hitters here. But Seif, Gabe Swanson, from Nebraska. 19 for 38 late. Whoa.
Between the Big Ten tournament and the regional in Stillwater, and obviously Stillwater's a hitter's paradise, but the guy now keep in perspective, he hit 18 home runs last year.
Okay. He
had 8 home runs the entire 2024 season, which included Stillwater and Omaha Big Ten tournament. He hit 7 in what they played 6 games in the postseason. He was 19 for 38 with 7 of his 8 home runs in the postseason. So if he didn't end the season well, I don't know who did. With all that said, though, Swanson is a very marginal prospect. A power guy, low on tools. But I mean, again, I just wanted to put him on the list because I don't know how you finished 19 for 38 with 7 home runs, over 2 weeks. Anybody can have a good game here and there, in the postseason, but that was fabulous.
I was going to say, and I know Steven's on here, a guy who's not a marginal prospect who may tie back to that JJ Bleday talk early on, but Kalen Culpepper, who K-State wins the regional. Now they're going to, I think they're going to Virginia for this super. That kind of feels like the buzzy, hey, he keeps moving up if he keeps doing what he's doing. What did you get from him?
Yeah, the funniest thing about on the last week of the regular season, Kansas State, West Virginia, those are my features on College Crosschecker and the Scouting Trail. And just watching Culpepper, he was basically in, out, just slicing through the zone instead of obviously, long, short to it, long through it. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, this is a total different swing. You watch him at the Big 12, the conference tournament. You watch him in the regional when he hit for the cycle. The regional was his big thing, kind of a slow adjustment in the conference tournament. But the regional, it was a different swing. It was like the swing you're looking for. So for him, who's already a top 2-round prospect, easy top 2-round prospect, to make adjustments on the fly towards the end of the season and just to basically have an entirely different swing path over a 10-day span was absolutely amazing. So he blew me away. Obviously, he was 7 for 12 in the regionals, hitting for the cycle. But he's now, just based on that 3 games in the regionals, he's back into the end of the first round for me. And I hate to be so up and down, but one of the first things DJ said in this, guys change all the time. Like, you can change your guy until that draft day. Now, you don't want to do that throughout the season. You don't want to have your draft list of guys 20th, then he's 10th, then he's 22nd, then he's 11th. Your scouting director is going to look at you like you're an idiot. But to hover in the second round and then pop up the end of the first round like Culpepper is likely doing, that's totally legitimate, and that happens all the time. Just like last year, remember, Shooter, when we switched in the 11th hour, 3 days before the draft, we went with Skeens over Cruz. That was the decision we made, and it looks obviously good to this day. Obviously we can't forecast 10 years from now, but like, it happens all the time. You just don't want to go 10th round, second round, 8th round, first round. I mean, you don't want to follow that up and down, but Culpepper's the man. His swing looked really, really good last weekend.
Hey, DJ, from the scouting director side, Culpepper's going off here. How apt would you be? All of a sudden, you were picking at, say, 16, 17, 18. Would you be booking a trip to Charlottesville to check him out? To like, hey, I need to make sure I know this. We had him in the second round, but now he might be here.
Yeah. If he was in our wheelhouse, if we had him in the right lane, we talk about putting players in the right lane, and we're trying to get comfortable with the player in the lane. Seif said a lot of really good stuff right there. You are taking on information constantly about these players. This isn't an unknown that there's been a little bit of inconsistency with Culpepper. And when he starts to answer some of those questions and he's bringing you new, this isn't static. Or excuse me, it's not noise. It's not static. This is real adjustments that the player is showing you and bringing you that information. You have to be willing to pay attention to it. You absolutely have to be willing to pay attention. So whether I'd be flying to Charlottesville to watch him or I'd be paying attention and watching it on TV, we'd absolutely be talking about and maybe discussing this at the combine with him when he comes in and sits down, and have him specifically go through the adjustments that he's made so that we can get comfortable and keep him alive as our pick. Great point, Seif. No, you're not going second round, fifth round, back to the second round. That's all over the place. Most of the time, if you can get the player in the right lane, which we should have been and scouts should have been able to do with Culpepper early in the year, at that point, you can tweak and you can adjust.
Yeah, so. And no time did Culpepper leave day one discussions. It just on day one. Yeah.
Right. Outstanding. Well, a few more here before we dive into our last guy that I really want to get involved with here. Cole Messina, Jared Jones, Dakota Jordan. So 3 SEC guys. Messina had a big postseason. Jared Jones, Dakota Jordan, both draft eligible softs. Seif, can you touch on each one of those guys?
Yeah, I saw Messina in week 1. I was driving all over South Carolina from Charleston to Myrtle Beach, and then I went inland to Columbia, and saw Messina in week 1. And I mean, his reputation, he's a good framer, receiver the ball, fair blocker, and just enough arm strength. And he's always struck out. He's got some power at the plate, but has always struck out a high rate. So I'm like, all right, he's a college catcher, he's got some pop, he can catch the ball. I'm thinking, all right, maybe, 3rd to 5th round, depending on the year ends. But man, he went in fuego during the SEC tournament. He did cool a bit in the regionals, but he finished with 20 home runs, hit 325. His K rate's still over 23. But at the end of the day, catchers with a 375 ISO who can receive, there's not a lot of those guys. And we put out about 4 weeks ago, we put out the top 10 college catchers. He's locked in the top 10 easily, but and he hadn't finished his season with 21 home runs in. But man, it's like, if anybody's risen behind the plate, he's definitely, because the other guys ahead of him, if your name's not Walter Yannick, the other catchers ahead of him just kind of been, okay, solid, not spectacular.
To me, he looks like a big leader. DJ, I just want to ask you on that, because we've talked in the past, I think we've brought it up multiple times, but all these big name catchers, right, that have a chance to be a first rounder. I guess you can't do too much of it because another team might get him, but would you feel more than confident, or not confident, more than happy walking away with Carson Messina in the late 3rd, 4th round, whatever he would be, versus spending that 1st round pick on one of those other guys?
Yeah, that's a hard yes. Taking Kevin Parada at the top of the first round. I'm making a pretty extreme statement here, so I'm making a generalization, but there's a lot of information that backs this.
Mm-hmm.
Taking guys like Kevin Parada that high in the draft and locking in on that is usually not the best decision. Not because Kevin Parada is not a big leaguer, not because Kevin Parada is not going to be good, because you can usually get the same thing later on in Cole Messina, in Drake Baldwin, or whoever it might be. There's just too much research involved that catching is a very difficult thing. And there's a scarcity thing to it. But there are a lot that exist. Just go look in the big leagues. There's a lot of day two, Latin American and day two catchers. Enough said.
At some point, we're going to have to bring on a catching specialist to defend the entire brand of catching from all this slander.
So let me be very clear. I think you're 100% right. And Seif, jump in here. Let me be very, very clear. Each year when we would start our process, and this wasn't just me sitting in there as a director, just years of in different roles there was a huge priority put on the day two catchers. Find me Cole Messina. And it could apply to a high school guy too. Find me Tucker Barnhart. The guy that you can take on day two, Jason DeLay, fourth round from Vandy. I mean, I can give you a whole bunch of examples, but they tend to outperform some of the guys much higher on the board. So you want to get these guys right because you can get the same thing 3 or 4 rounds later.
This is a bit of a tangent off of that, but does it go through your mind at all? Hey, we're drafting these really good arms. We're going to take this guy who's an offensive catcher who's going to butcher these guys and kill or hinder their development. Does that go through your head?
That's what we have the late rounds for, right, Seif?
Yeah.
We get a good receiving talent.
No, I mean, at a certain point, you're just drafting bats. You really don't care where they play, right? These guys are hit. Take them in the 6th round. Take them now. You know. So
if I need a guy to catch, shoot, or hunt, I'm just going to take him from the University of Illinois in the 16th round and say, get back there and make sure that he's, or catch your young Latin arms or whatever it might be. If I really liked a guy's bat in the 3rd round and crappy behind the plate, I'm still going to take the bat.
All those pitching prospects checking the lineups to make sure the offensive guy is not catching that day. But can you go back to Bear Jones here and Dakota Jordan, both kind of swing and miss guys with mammo power? Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, just that's the whole thing for me. I'm a very traditional scout, but I'm also one that I read statistics because statistics don't lie. They tell you what happened when you're not at the ballpark. I mean, so if you're scouting a guy and you see him 5 times, that's great. But what about his other 51 games during the regular season? Man, I love Dakota Jordan. I mean, it's an athlete. It's premium bat speed. You know him probably better than I, just you and your Mississippi State. But it just scares me. He strikes out so much. And he did have a good postseason. He was 11 for 36. He hit over 300. But he struck out 13 times against 1 walk. So I know we're supposed to be talking about late season risers here, but for me, Dakota Jordan, I see all this other stuff about, he's top 30, he's top 35. I just cannot take the guy, despite all the marvelous things he does and can do. That strikeout range is just way, way too high for me. And I put him in there just because like the 13 strikeouts to 1 walk, but at the same time hitting over 300 against good competition in your conference tournament and the regional. So you may have, like I said, you have more knowledge on Dakota than me, man. I love the athlete. But moving on to Jared Jones, another SEC guy, it's kind of the same thing. Huge power. He's had 5 home runs in the postseason, but with his strikeout rate where it's at, that's just a tough pick for me, despite his 80 grade power, despite his, I think, his successful transition to first base. He's not Wally Joyner or Mark Grace over there, but he's certainly developing in that regard. And he's a sophomore eligible too, so has a little bit more leverage and time and feel for what to do, this draft or next year return into Baton Rouge. But just 2 guys from the SEC that had really good postseasons.
And Bear Jones, actually, there's a ball still traveling here at NPI that he hit at our future games way back. DJ, let me ask you, because this may be way off, but I'm thinking back to what year was it that Aaron Judge went with the Yanks?
15, 16?
14
or 16 we take
13 or 14.
Maybe.
He was not their first pick, right? So Jagielo goes first. Eric Jagielo goes.
He was our third pick, I believe.
That's kind of the vibe I get on like a Dakota Jordan, right? The Diamondbacks have those 3 picks there. Do we think we can grab this guy who has that huge ceiling? Yes, there's some swing and miss. All of a sudden, you start thinking, could he be, an Aaron Judge? It's not fair to say that to anybody, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden, something just clicked for this kid from Mississippi who didn't play much high school baseball, was a 2-sport kid, goes off the campus, has weird numbers. You said he kind of went off in the postseason. I think like he was like 1 for his first 16 there. So the 13 for the 30 that he was like super back half where he absolutely went off. But like, is that something you'd be thinking where I'm off the top of my head, we'll go more into the teams and kind of thought process in a later episode, but the Diamondbacks who have four picks, that's where I think, does Dakota Jordan come into play here because they don't think he'll get to 36. So maybe we'll grab him at 27, wherever they're at. Is that something you'd be thinking about, DJ? Where this upside or the ceiling's so high on this guy, maybe we'll just try to steal this ceiling if he gets there, and then we can grab the next 2 a little bit safer.
Yeah. Shooter, you and I have talked about this. Aaron Judge, by the way, was 13, and he was our 3rd pick. We did Jagielo, then we went with Ian Clarkin, then we went to Judge. So
it's amazing when you look at stuff like that.
What you're talking. And then a few picks later, I think Austin Wilson went off the board, so they took the cheese there. But here's the deal. If you're not thinking that way, to answer your question directly, you're making a massive mistake. I'm going to be very clear. You're making a massive mistake. The same discussion that was probably had in draft rooms, certainly the Padres were willing to do it with James Wood. Mm-hmm. But we can go back historically and we can look at Giancarlo Stanton and we can look at Matt Olson and we can look at Trevor Story and Aaron Judge and Dakota and so on and so forth. These are the types of players. They're absolutely not going to exist later on. We just talked about catchers. They do. Do we like Janik? Absolutely might be the best catcher in the draft. He's fantastic. He might exist later on in the draft somewhere because catching's a very difficult thing. I can assure you Dakota Jordan's tool set, it's not going to exist elsewhere, just like James Woods didn't. So if you're a team, certainly with these multiple picks, you're referring to the Diamondbacks here, it would almost be irresponsible not to just pull this off the board and say, well, we're taking, and you would hope that somebody in the room, you have a Seif sitting in the room, you have DJ or Shooter, they can actually sit there and you're not just throwing caution to the wind. You can build a narrative, and you just started to build it for Dakota Jordan. You can start to build a narrative that makes you confident that he could be fill in the blank.
And it wouldn't be a true college show without Seif. These last 2 guys, one, it wouldn't be a college show having you on without talking a little bit about Sam Antonacci from Coastal Carolina, a Midwest native shortstop who, I mean, you have been talking about for years now. What did he do late?
I saw him at the Sun Belt tournament where he was solid. He wasn't spectacular, but then he ended it in the regional really well. 6 for 16 with 2 home runs after homering just 4 times all year. So he finally got to the power. He's from the area that I live, so I saw him 2 years in junior college, and he had plus bat speed, easy. And I know it's a different game, JUCO, but bat speed's bat speed, whether he's playing in high school, junior college, or at in the SEC, it's bat speed. He just did not show the same bat speed at the Sun Belt tournament that he did in junior college, and the homer twice in a 4-game regional after only homering 4 times all year. Hopefully he's getting to that power a little bit more, or just, it was reminded of or something. But I've always liked Antonacci. Even 2 years ago when I think he was in our top 10 junior college prospects list for the final season, and Sean Duncan looked at me like, Sam Antonacci from Illinois? I'm like, yeah, he's really good. So he's played his way up, not only up JUCO draft list, but our draft board as well.
Okay, I want to wrap up here. DJ, you're going to be able to come in on this one. And on a future show, we're going to dive into some draft plans for specific teams and kind of piece through some draft stuff. But let's talk this last guy. And right off the top, I want to know, does this guy have a chance to go 1-1? But JJ Weatherholt.
Talking to me or DJ?
I'm talking to you first.
All right, I'm all over this. I was on cruise control with Weatherholt all season long, right? I saw him last summer. He only hit because he had a bad hammy, and then he re-injured a different hammy, I believe, on a slide at home plate. I think week 3 or 4. So he didn't come back until early April when he's fully healthy, and hasn't hit for the same power. Hasn't had as many stolen bases as his sophomore year, which was out of this world. So I kind of stuffed him, like 5th, 6th overall, super talented, twitchy. And I played into the narrative that, he's going to slide back over to second base. He's just playing shortstop to increase his draft value, or he's going to slide to center field because he's a 70, 80 runner. But all of a sudden, I'm watching West Virginia play, and the infield he's shading the second base bag, hard ground ball, goes to his backhand like 3 quick steps, backhands it from deep in the hole, throws a laser beam across the diamond, and gets the runner by half step. And I'm like, was that Weatherholt? And it obviously was. And then I am looking at Twitter and see the replay time and time again, but I've seen it live. And I'm like, why can't this guy play shortstop? Like, that is beyond a major league shortstop play right there. What he just did with the range, the hands, the throw, the accuracy, it was right there. I'm like, that's what they do. That's what the good ones do. And so DJ and I got into a little conversation on Slack, and like, why isn't this guy 1-1? Like, that was better than, as much as I like Charlie Condon, as much as I like Bazana, I got a man crush on Cags. I mean, like, when you're looking for 1-1, you're looking middle of diamond, impact, middle of the order bat. Like, that's what Dylan Cruz was. That's why we had him ranked there. And that's what Weatherholt is. Like,
wow.
So I'm going to adjust my draft list. I mean, obviously we need to huddle up here and polish it off, but like, Weatherholt's going to go from, I think he was 7 to, hey, we're talking about him for 1-1, because how can you not, just based on that one play, because he showed me like, hey, shortstop is not this, he's getting moved from on day one, or he's getting put in the outfield from day one. Shortstop's a real thing after seeing that one play.
I feel like the show's come full circle from at the top, hey, who had the buzz, did well in the conference tournament, to literally this one play, which you're watching it, and Derek Jeter's sitting up in the stands. He just went backhand. Derek Jeter's now with the Cleveland Guardians, and he's picking 1-1, and he's thinking that's the guy we got to go with. DJ, let me end with you here. Just from the scouting room perspective, you're the scouting director. You're picking at 1 or 2. How are you separating those guys? Weatherholt just came into the mix. Is it a time where now we have to start thinking about how much better this guy is than that guy financially, right? I think the guards are picking at 1. They have about 18 million. The slots probably, I think it's like 9-8. Is Cags versus, if we have them evaluate the same, how much separation is there? Yeah. That was all over the place, but go into what you think with that.
Let's keep it real simple. Let's line the hitters up in the order that we like their bats. That's where we're going to start. That's not where we're going to finish. That's where we're going to start. And what you end up finding out here, probably with these players, having not gone out and seen them a bunch and done tons of work on them, my guess is we're going to probably land with, man, we like Cags' bat, we like Condon's bat, we like Bazana's bat, we like Weatherholt. We're going to get there. The industry is going to get there. They're going to like all 4 or 5 of those bats. Now you got to move to layer number 2. Okay, let's talk about the complete player. Most of the WAR value that you're trying to acquire is going to happen in the batter's box. But there is this thing where defense does become important when you're talking about players that can play primo positions, whether it's a great catcher like Rushman, or it's a true shortstop like an Anthony Volpe or something like that, or Eli De La Cruz or something like that. So once you start to layer that on to try to break the ties of these players, you got to wonder how good Weatherholt is from a value standpoint. Then to your point on money, I don't see Weatherholt's name anywhere. You're just laying in the weeds. The name's not coming out. That could be the prime candidate to shave even more than there. So I think it's a very interesting name. I know we've talked about him before. This isn't like a hitter that closes his eyes and runs into a 95-mile-an-hour fastball and drives it out of the ballpark, and then you say all of a sudden he's got power and he can hit. But when a shortstop does something like that, that's pretty impressive. It's the number 1 skill on the field that we know with a good makeup athlete can get better. We know that. We all talk about that. It's why Swanson, when Dansby Swanson would make careless, immature errors after missing a lot of his sophomore season at Vanderbilt, he would also make spectacular plays. And you would look at him and go, yeah, that he's just going to be a shortstop. He can do it. Even though he would make careless plays. And sure enough, they don't all have to look like Ellie De La Cruz. Sometimes they can look like Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson and Anthony Volpe and JJ Weatherholt.
Let me just, for the scouts listening, area guys, each one likes those guys, right? The Florida guy likes Kaggs. The Georgia guy likes Condon. The PNW guy loves Bazana. And then you got a guy in West Virginia who loves Weatherholt. Do you, as a scouting director, do you have to deal with those area guys? Do you have to pacify them at all? Or it's like, hey, in the end, thank you for your service here. This is my decision. Or also from the top down, owner, president, CEO, chairman, all those guys who are going, hey man, I flipped on ESPN last night. This Weatherholt kid went in the hole and just made an absolute dime of a throw. Do you then have to pull up your synergy and your tapes of Kaggs? Like, he hit one 560. It was just in a midweek, and you show him the video of that. Tell me about that from your sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're picking up on that part of the draft, this isn't new news. It's not like Caglione just came out of nowhere, or Condon.
Yeah.
You don't, this guy. You've known these players. So if you haven't been doing your work along the way, the Yankees aren't doing their work on Bazana right now. The Diamondbacks aren't spending a lot of time on Bazana and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you're Cleveland or you're Cincinnati, you're wondering, does Cincinnati want to miss the guy right down the road from them in Weatherholt? Because right down the road. So yeah, absolutely. I think the area scout here knows what he had in the very beginning of the year. So hopefully he's done his work. And at this point in time, it becomes such a higher level decision that if you need any additional information, you might go to the area scout. But what you might be asking him is, hey, when we go to the combine, what types of things do we still need to get answered that you might want to know? So it's more of those kind of conversations than pouring into what the area scout has, because he's probably done a really, really good job along the way. You would think he would have.
Well, that's a perfect way. We're going to end it up there. Next time we will talk about some combine interviews, what teams are looking for, what they should be looking for. DJ might even put me on the hot seat, like we're going player versus the team. But guys, this was awesome. Seif, DJ, outstanding stuff today. We got a lot of talent on the way to the road to the draft. We're about 5-6 weeks away right now. Maybe talk some draft league. But guys, thanks a lot for coming on today. DJ, awesome stuff as always. Seif, can't wait to see what you got coming out in the future. We will have an updated draft board, shooter hunt here with the War Room. Until next time, we'll see you guys.